Chapter 9 is looking at class and lifestyles, certainly the way people live, the work they do, the quality of their food and housing, the education they can provide for their children, the way they use their leisure time are all shaped by their place in the stratification system. Certainly, the rich have far more money than the poor. They tend to have more education and a great deal more wealth as measured by the value of homes, cars, investments, and certainly many other things. Certainly, the poor face constant financial insecurity, degraded social status, and limited political influence. There is a hypothesis, the learning general hypothesis, which means it's lessons that are learned in one sphere of life are carried over into other aspects of life or other areas of life. I want to briefly go through the different classes with you. Certainly, sociologists do regard the upper class as being divided into two subgroups. We've got the richest and most prestigious families who constitute the elite or the high society. They tend to be white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. And then we have the newly rich, which is your self-made millionaires. Basically, they don't have the inherited name, so to speak. But these are families who may be extremely wealthy, but they've not attained sufficient prestige to be included in the communities and associations of high society. Make sure you know those two groups, the two subgroups. You will see those on your exam. The noblesse oblige. Make sure you know that you know these two concepts. The noblesse oblige is the devotion of time, money, and efforts to public service. Okay, it is an emphasis on responsibility for the less advantaged members of society. And then we have a term, conspicuous consumption, which is just extravagant expenditures. Looking at the middle class, these are the proportion, well, about 45% of Americans do classify themselves in the middle class. The large proportion of Americans who identify themselves as members of the middle class is by no means a homogeneous population. They are often referred to as the middle classes to emphasize the existence of strata with different incomes and education and access to wealth. One group of Americans who do identify themselves as members of the middle class are your highly educated professionals. Most often they have attended graduate schools and built successful careers as engineers, lawyers, doctors, dentists, stockholders, corporate managers, and we can go on with that. Their comfortable incomes, make sure you know, is often well above $100,000 a year. But they can also be derived from family-owned businesses. Members of this class typically live in the suburbs. They join expensive country clubs. They're active in community affairs and spend a good deal of time transporting their children to enriching activities. Another segment of the middle class is composed of people whose income is derived from small businesses, especially stores and community-oriented enterprises. They are often referred to as the petite bourgeoisie. Make sure you know that these are just the independent small business owners. Certainly the members of this class may be among the leaders of local chambers of commerce and other business associations that advocate local economic growth. Americans have always believed that they could achieve individual affluence and become part of a great middle class. Thus, in subjective terms, the middle class is the largest single class in American society. But in cultural terms, it is highly diverse because so many different lifestyles are represented within it. There are some recent figures that have been released by the Department of Labor that show people in the middle income quintile are now spending almost half their incomes on three basic necessities of life. These are housing, utilities, and health care. The average price of a home has risen and fewer people can afford to buy a private home. Make sure you know that home ownership is still the central symbol of membership in the American middle class. Also, make sure you know that the proportion of Americans who live in detached single-family homes declined from 1970 to 2000, while the proportion living in mobile homes and in apartments has increased. The working class, make sure you know that this is the class that is undergoing the most rapid and difficult changes in America today. As with the middle class, those who classify themselves as members of the working class are extremely diverse. They are skilled craftspeople, plumbers, carpenters, machinists, factory workers, and others who earn wages protected by unions. There are people in the working class who work long hours yet cannot earn enough income to lift them very far above the poverty threshold. The struggling working people and their families are sometimes referred to as the working poor. Make sure you know that the most important characteristic of the working class is employment in semi-skilled or unskilled manual occupations. And another distinguishing feature of this class is union membership. Labor unions refer to their members as working people. However, the proportion of workers who are union members is declining. Now, there are two major divisions within the American working class. Make sure you know these. The first one is often referred to as the industrial working class, and it consists of blue-collar workers who work in large manufacturing industries. And the second major division of the American working class is composed of workers employed in skilled crafts, especially in the construction trades. So make sure you know that. Make sure you know that sociologists have found that the industrial working class is more conscious of its class identity and more prone to believe that its fortunes as a class depend on its ability to win in labor management conflicts. Members of the skilled trades are more likely to be uncertain about their class identity. Make sure you know that, or to think of themselves as members of the middle class. For both segments of the working class, financial worries are certainly a routine fact of life. Make sure you know there's more racial and ethnic diversity in the working class than in any of the other classes. White workers in the working classes are more likely to work alongside Black and Hispanic workers, for example, than are white members of other classes. This situation often brings workers of different races and ethnic backgrounds into competition when jobs are in short supply. And of course, animosity is often produced by such competition. Then we have the poor class. Make sure you know that African Americans, Hispanics, and children, where the majority live in female-headed families, are disproportionately represented among the poor. Looking at the working poor class, I want to say that one of the chief causes of poverty is that people who are working full-time are not being paid wages that give them enough income to raise them above the poverty line. 2/3 of American children living in poverty have a parent who works full-time for wages that are too low to lift the household out of poverty. Another reason for the increase in poverty is the increase in the number of single-parent, female-headed families. More difficult for a woman to support a family alone than it is for a man. One result of this trend is toward the feminization of poverty. Make sure you know what this is. It just means that a rising proportion of the nation's children are growing up in poor female-headed families and are deprived of the advantages enjoyed by children from more affluent homes.